Storm Girl by Linda Nicklin. Linda Nicklin's eco-thriller Storm Girl charts a dystopian near future where planet Earth has largely drowned under rising seas, disease is rife, and society has broken down. Everything is now owned by the super rich and exploited for their own personal gratification, including the people still struggling to live on what land remains. Angel, the storm girl of the title, has been harvested by a gang of reapers. She knows this is a death sentence and she is frantic to escape. She seizes the scrap of a chance and dives into the treacherous waters of a drowned city. From the depths of despair, she begins to find glimmers of hope and becomes part of a growing resistance, fighting back against the wholesale plundering of the planet. But as the movement becomes stronger, there's a devastating truth waiting to confront Angel. After all she has been through, she never anticipated needing to answer this question. Whose side is she really on?
Okay, so who are you and what's your book?
Hi, I'm Linda Nicklin and my book is called Storm Girl.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in Lincolnshire. I've lived in a number of places around the country, but came back here about 20 years ago. I live on the outskirts of the city, but only about 30 miles away from the sea.
And how did you get into writing?
I've been wanting to write all my life, but generally I didn't find the time really until my children had left home. I did a master's in creative writing at a local university, which helped me to think that I should have a go, that I know I'm better with a deadline. If I'd not done that, then I really would not have got anywhere near, because I could have put it off for another day.
And where did this particular book come from?
The character Angel has been with me a long time, and I couldn't quite work out how to tell her story. She grew up with me, and it came to real life in the time when the Occupy movement was really in the news. And for the first time, I realised that democracy was like a theatre curtain, and the actual power was the rich and influential people behind the curtain. And every year, every time we voted, we thought we were actually voting for something which was a sham.
And that speaks to quite a number of themes in the book. So the book is set in the near future?
Yes, in the very near future, where the climate emergency has caused sea levels to rise. And as we know, it will take out most major cities in the world. London will be largely decimated by rising sea levels. But rural Lincolnshire, at 3 degrees, we're likely to lose a third of the county. So it's very close to my heart. I was driving yesterday along a road where permanent emergency evacuation routes are marked to help people get to higher ground when the floodwaters happen. But what has happened in Storm Girl is that the super rich are now totally in control of the whole planet. Everything on it is their asset. They own it. And that includes the people. And
it includes Angel, the central character of your book. Could you tell us a little bit more about Angel?
Angel grew up in the old lakes. There's now new lakes. The old lake district where she was, she didn't realise, a little bit like the girl in the tower, she was being hidden away. She doesn't know about that. She discovers that later in the story. She is kidnapped, and the story begins with her waking up in a locker, being transported to a factory ship. She escapes. She's immensely resourceful. Her father has taught her how to survive. But what happens is that a resistance to the super elite forms around her. And she is she's not a comfortable people person and finds it very difficult to be a figurehead.
So there are lots of big themes in this book, but it's also, we're calling it an eco-thriller, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's also a thriller.
Yeah. Angel is immensely resourceful and fierce woman. I like the idea. I made Angel be a fighter like a woman. Mm-hmm. That was really important to me. Mm-hmm. You see so much fighting where there's a red mist and there's no consequences. And people walk away and make another red mist. Mm-hmm. And I wanted her to be the kind of fighter where you wouldn't see it coming. It would be a blow measured for the circumstances, and she would then deal with the consequences personally. Yeah. She always reflected on her actions. She was taught to be measured and fair.
And in the background of our audio right now, people watching the video might be hearing the sounds of a dog. Yes. So you have a Labrador called Penny, that's right. And you've also given Angel an animal friend in the book, is that right?
Yes. When she's on her making her escape, she actually, one of the places that she stays have a dog. It's not a Labrador like Penny, but it is a dog that adores her and is her guide, and at different times plays quite key parts in her story.
So this is a story set in England, in a flooded England. Mm-hmm. Are there places that people might recognise in the book which are real places in your real life, for example?
Well, the place that she goes to in York, that she stays in a beguinage, which is a lay women's refuge system that used to happen in the Middle Ages. And when I retired from work, I made my final escape. I went with a friend to Bruges, and in Bruges there is a beguinage, and it was beautiful, and the sense of peace and safety was beautiful. So there's one. I had a very fine holiday in Foy in Cornwall, and a part of the book is based there. I went there on holiday and found myself in the middle of a book festival, which was really, serendipitous, and I learned a great deal there. So York is one of my favourite places. I always meant to live in York, but never quite managed it. But Clifford's Tower is a very significant part of the story.
And talk to us about your favourite character or a favourite moment from the book that isn't too spoilery.
Favourite? I like the beguinage. Actually, I really like the star people. Fundamentally, they are people who in society now are largely invisible, the old, the disabled, and I made them into people who, because the system only valued them as an asset, are of no worth. And so they were invisible and capable of doing a great deal because people ignored them. I mean, body harvesting doesn't actually work if you're an old person with grey hair. So they were actually a really powerful and resourceful and funny group. And they were key to Angel's survival.
So it feels like there are some very big themes in the book, that it feels like it's very much, although set in the future, about now and how the ways we live now and the ways that our society is being organised could lead to this near future. What do you particularly hope that people come away from the book feeling?
Well, I hope that they feel that it was a satisfying story. It's a thriller. I want people to lay awake at night turning pages. I want them to think, crikey, is it 2:00? Can I finish the book now, or do I have to get up and go to work? I love that kind of thriller. So some of my favourite books kept me awake because I couldn't sleep till I'd finished them. So that's one thing. But I want them to love Angel for her individuality and her skills and her personal honesty and her journey. I want them to enjoy me having sunk my school and other things. And there's lots of things, like she doesn't like to wear makeup. She's herself. She resists being shaped. And that's something I would like to see people to see as a strength, not as an awkwardness. because we really all ought to know ourselves. But I also want people to feel uncomfortable when they realise the body farming and the slavery, because modern slavery is a reality now. There's nobody watching this or reading the book whose lives won't have been made better by modern slavery, and it is obscene. So there are some deep personal and political factors. Also, there's the climate emergency, the result of the. I tried very hard not to make the weather a character in the book, because as the climate breaks down, it won't be predictable. But I've made the damage done by the climate emergency and the disruption and destruction really very clear. And I hope people will look at that and think, well, actually, that isn't a world I want to live in. Things have got to change.
And finally, is the book dedicated to anyone in particular?
Yes, I had quite a lot of fun deciding who to dedicate it to. Obviously, I dedicated it to my daughter Hannah and my son Lawrence, but I have a lot of good friends. And one of the things that I said was that there were times when I was writing where I didn't have a word left in my head, but I needed to talk. And it's a good friend who will listen to complete garbage and not mind when you just need to get something out of your head and it's all stuck and gone. So I've got some excellent friends and I dedicate it to those people.
Brilliant. Thank you for your time. So Storm Girl, published by Fantastic Books, written by Linda Nicklin.
Melody muses on rising tides and canine friends. Storm Girl by Linda Nicklin is an eco-thriller suitable for all ages. The whole story plays out against humankind's relationship with the planet, but Nicklin weaves an intimately human story of a young woman called Angel and some very special relationships with animals along the way. Things are pretty desperate, and Angel doesn't know, indeed can't know, who to trust. That even stretches to the animal kingdom. There are creatures out there who see her as a meal, but not all of them. We meet a man called Mac and a dog called Layla, who becomes a key part of Angel's escape from the Reapers, who tried to snatch her at the start of the book. There's a special bond between Layla and Mac, but while Angel needs help, Layla protects her, as though there's a bond there too. It's somehow more than the dog-owner relationship and more than the normal communication between person and animal. Layla was the subject of Melody Trudeau's question to Linda Nicklin. What sort of bonds does Layla forge with people, and is this to do with the type of dog she is? Here's Linda's answer. Layla is loosely based on my current dog Penny and my previous 2 dogs, a Springer called Blue and a Lab called Ness. All 3 dogs would walk for hours and were always by my side. Years later, I still have Blue and Ness-shaped spaces at my heel. They each had their own character, but what they could do was read my feelings, and I think that Layla had that ability too. Mac had been injured and she guarded him. He asked her to look after Angel when she stepped out that first night in the quarry, and she did. Reaped, on the run, longing to go home, lost in a strange world, Angel needed a friend. She didn't know who she could trust, and Layla just stepped into that space. Angel could trust her completely. And later in the book, when Angel was in despair and lost even to herself, Layla found her. Oh, well, that was nice. Now, I know that not all dogs are as good as Layla at getting it right when they try to help, but I'm sure that all dog owners will recognise that innate canine quality and the dog-shaped spaces that remain forever at our heels.
This is the first chapter of Storm Girl by Linda Nicklin, read by Dan. Chapter 1. The sack over Angel's face smelled of old vomit, and her cheek was tender and sticky. Her shoulder was bruised, and her throat burned from thirst and stomach acid. The water that they had forced down her throat was doped. Just the thought of it made her retch. She had tried to fight them, but they just laughed and shoved her back in the locker. It fitted her like a coffin. She stretched her legs and braced her back hard against the side. Her naked feet pushed against rough wood. Her muscles ached from inactivity and unspent adrenaline, but she had to control her fear and focus. She had to be ready. Angel knew that she'd been stolen. Harvested. They hadn't touched her yet, but that would come. She calculated that they'd been on the move for 3 days. At first, they'd travelled at night, but now she could tell from the bird song that it was daytime. The sense of tyres rolling and spitting over rough stones had given way to a sideways rise and fall of open water, and these were not the sounds of woodland birds. The screeching that she could hear reminded her of the winter gulls, scavengers and bringers of disease that moved inland from the sea when the weather turned cold. She took a deep breath and shifted the weight on her hip. She knew what she had to do. Her stepfather had taught her well. She reckoned that she had 1 day left, at the most. She scanned her body. Parts were probably already traded. She was just an incubator for her organs. Her eggs would be the prize, farmed fast and traded. No tats, no pox, no scars. They would take her skin too. Why would they want me? She'd asked her stepfather when he told her the story. A girl in the tower was her favourite, but this was the one about the girl who ran away. Why not you? He'd asked softly. You know there's no rescue, right? She sighed at the space that he left for her reply. No, Daddy, nobody gets rescued. That's right. Always be safe, he spoke in a musical, fairy tale voice. Guard, hide, run, kill, or die. Angel concentrated hard as she uncurled a finger for each action. When he had finished, her little hand was spread out like a starfish, and her daddy had kissed her sticky palm. She breathed out, trying to calm herself with the memory of his safe, fresh air smell. She breathed in, instantly alert. Somebody was undoing the lock. Her heart pounded in her ears as she strained to listen. There was no chatter, no bustle, just the sound of the engine accelerating and the padlock being unhooked. Cold air touched her skin. Angel closed her eyes against the light. Rough hands pulled at her shoulder. "Get up," ordered a gravelly female voice. Angel felt the plastic ties on her wrist and ankles pinch and then snap off. "Stand up." They're definitely Reapers, she thought as she struggled to get out of the locker. "I'm dead." The hood was ripped away. She blinked hard, then turned to look at the woman. She was short and thick-set, dressed in a stained boiler suit, waterproof apron and white Wellington boots. "No funny stuff. You want to die right here? It can be arranged." She looked Angel up and down. Shame not to be a breeder, though. "But no buts," she mocked. "You should have been more careful." The woman clicked her tongue and shoved Angel away from the locker. "What's happening?" Her throat was raw. The woman grunted and pushed her toward the door. "Move! The farm ship's waiting," said the woman, touching Angel's silver hair. "Out you go." Angel stumbled into the glare of the afternoon sun. The air tasted of salt. She glanced around and saw a muddy channel etched between makeshift buoys tethered to the shadows of buildings that were submerged beneath dirty, foaming water. Lamppost heads bobbed in and out of the waves. Further away, the arc of a roller coaster swayed to and fro. She'd heard stories of whole cities that had been lost to the final tidal surge. They said that coastal sea routes were treacherous now, punctuated by church towers at high tide and trees and rooftops at low tide. The woman pushed her further along the cold, greasy deck. On the horizon, Angel could see white specks where gulls dipped and reeled in a line of soot-black smoke. In the pit of her stomach, Angel knew that each passing minute took her further away from land and closer to the gulls and the factory ship. She had to find a way to get off this boat. She shuffled forwards. Her legs trembled with the effort of moving. In front of her, there was a line of shivering people, wide-eyed and silent as they rose from sedation into a nightmare reality. A man in a white coat moved along the queue, holding a gun-shaped instrument in his hand. He scanned each person's arms. "They've chipped me," Angel gasped. Behind him, a woman with a box of syringes snapped on a plastic glove. The one who had got her out of the crate pushed roughly past and disappeared below deck. From the size of the boat, Angel guessed that there were probably room for another 20 lockers. This was a good harvest. At the front of the queue, 2 men hosed down a naked and crying man. The girl in front turned around to look at Angel. Her hair was the colour of caramel and her skin was so pale that it seemed blue. She leaned towards Angel. "I'm meat. You look good for a cycle of eggs." Her eyes are blank. She's already dead, Angel thought. "What?" "Eyes too blue. They'll fog. You're lucky. They should let you keep them." Angel leaned in towards her. She could feel the girl's body heat on her shoulder. "We have to escape. Jump. Jump now. 1, 2... No! They shoot," the girl hissed back. "I can't swim that far. You have to." "I can't." "Try," said Angel, pushing her hard. The girl screamed as she slipped and stumbled across the deck. She missed the railing and fell flat into the sea. The others in the queue turned as if in a dream. The woman threw the syringes down and ran to the rail. Sensing a chance to escape, a man and 2 women jumped overboard. People began to scream. Angel crouched low and crossed to the other side, ducked under the rail and slipped silently into the water. Hoping that no one had noticed, she walked with her hands around to the back of the slowing boat, where a red and white dinghy slapped in its wake. The propeller stopped, and it drifted towards her. On the far side, she could hear shouts and screams over the crack of gunfire. She edged along, glanced around the hull and caught a glimpse of a girl treading water and hiding close to the side of the boat. There was the noise of fighting, and then 2 more people jumped into the sea over Angel's head. She had to go before she was seen. Weightless, Angel took a deep breath and slipped under the water. The pulse of the idling engine thrummed against her chest. She grabbed hold of the rope and pulled hard. The dinghy resisted and then slid towards her. She looped it around the stationary propeller, then kicked hard and struck out for land. Water was her element. She had swum in the lakes as a child. She used to listen to the water, feel the flow with her hair, lie under the surface and watch birds fly overhead. She could find the energy of the lake and let it take her. She surfaced behind the crest of a wave, took a breath, then dived back under. Her heart pounded in her ears. She checked her stroke rhythm, searched for calm in her adrenaline-fueled brain, then swam for her life. The water fluttered between her fingers. A surge of cold pushed her forward. The tide had turned. 9 lung-burning strokes later, she rose and gasped for air. She felt a splat as a bullet hit the water close by. Shrill voices shouted in alarm. She heard a loud splash, glanced back and saw that a man had just dived into the water. A woman was directing him towards her. He kicked off in a thrashing, twisting stroke, inefficient but strong. She took another breath, pulled herself underwater and swam for the town. She needed to get away fast. The tide was bringing him towards her. 2 sets of binoculars watched from one of the ragged houses on the edge of the town. Impressive, wouldn't you say, Mary? Depends on what you call impressive, Jim. 1 dead, some still in the water, 1 swimming our way. Where? Oh, yes, the Reaper's chasing her. No style, but he's got power, Jim whispered. She's there, breathing between the waves. Good girl. Mary leaned forward to get a better view. Jim checked the boat. Black smoke lay low on the water. They haven't realised the propeller's snagged. They're burning the motor out. Not very bright. Where is she now? Heading for the old town, away from the channel. Come on. I'd better get ready for what the tide brings in. Jim stood up. Got your knife? He tapped his pocket and nodded, picked up a cloth bag, felt for his torch and slipped the strap of his binoculars over his head. Mary watched him square his shoulders, pull his collar up and step out into the light. Come back safe, she whispered after the door had closed. Angel had reached the edge of the town. She could feel the pull of the undertow between the buildings. Swimming in the old lakes at home could be cold and dangerous, but this was a restless, deceptive sea. She could see glass-smooth water where it raced over the ridge and slopes of rooftops, but it churned and rolled in the angles of the buildings. She had to fight against being dragged into the rush between the walls. Checking back, she saw the splash of the Reaper about 50 strokes behind. He's strong. She kicked and dived under the surface. Through a tangle of dead branches, she could see the silted rectangular shape of a garden fence. She moved closer and saw the flap of a shed roof opening and closing like an envelope in the swell. A carefully timed kick got her through the gap and into the shed. Desperately, she searched for a weapon in a tangled pile of metal and debris. The roof opened and let in more light. She saw a board on the wall holding rusted, silt-covered tools. Angel snatched at the hammer and screwdriver. Their clasps disintegrated into brown clouds around her hands. Above, she could see the dark shape of the swimmer. He was treading water, looking for her. She pushed hard against the shed roof and kicked with all of her strength. Legs pumping, she powered up through the water and drove the screwdriver into the Reaper's stomach. His flesh resisted for a second, then yielded. The blade sank deep into him. The cold water and his exhaustion dampened his reactions for a second, but then his body spasmed, just as Angel rose out of the water and brought the hammer down hard on the base of his skull. She settled his unconscious body face down in the water, and then, without pausing, turned and swam away from the widening pool of blood. "Tidy," Mary whispered to herself. "One to watch, that one." She tracked the Reaper's lifeless body as each wave carried him closer to the broken remains of the town. Then she turned her attention back to the distant swimmer. Now where has she gone? That was Chapter 1 of Storm Girl by Linda Nicklin, read by Dan.
I have to say, Linda, that for any viewers of this recording who haven't read Storm Girl, I recommend it very strongly.
Thank you.
It's a dystopian future, and not very far in the future. Well, there are three things I like particularly about it. First of all, despite its brutally dystopian theme, this half-drowned world and lots of dead people and the rest of it, ruined communities, it is first and foremost what used to be called a rattling good yarn. It's an adventure story, and the narrative pace never slackens. It just grips you and holds you. Of course, there are rises and falls of tension, as there are in any good novel, but the plot never congeals. You never get the saggy middle. And the second, although the horrors of this near future world that you create are faced full on, you never dwell on them to a maudlin or distasteful extent. You present them, but you don't wallow in them. That's really well balanced. And third, in addition to this, there's a wonderful protagonist, Angel, whose character evolves and toughens as her story unfolds. The book boasts a wealth of strong and brave and admirable women characters in whose courage and commitment lies a glimmer of hope for the world's future. I was rather entertained by the bad guys, because I saw some of those as satirical portraits of certain influential people alive today.
Absolutely, they are.
I loved them.
I put some in so I could kill them. So we're back to killing our characters again here.
We're back to killing our characters, but there's the ones you actually enjoyed killing.
Yeah. I saved them specially. It was...
I thought it was a terrific book. And, you know, I've read it twice, and I've recommended it very strongly to others, particularly people who are interested in and concerned about the environmental crisis. You know, because it is such a great book about the environmental crisis. And you're writing more.
Yes, I'm in the. I really hope it's the end stages. of my next novel.
I know that.
And this is kind of dystopian. I do think that possibly Angel has another story.
I think she has. I mean, at the end of Stormgirl, I really thought she could reappear somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the problem is, again, we're back to killing characters. I suspect I've got to kill a fairly main character who's dear to her in order to pick it up again with the same level of drama. So that one's kind of brewing. But the one I'm writing at the moment is about a time that we live, again, where you don't know what the truth is, and that it's possible to digitally remaster anybody's face, anybody's voice, anybody's past, anybody's actions, and the power that gives organizations. And I've got an international organization called Global Health, but in the broadest spin sense, it's a healthy environment has a good police service, and a healthy world has a good armed forces, as well as a health service. So health, a healthy community rather than healthy individuals. And they basically are fostering wars and then going in and ransacking the countries where they've created the wars, but they've also put in the arms and the soldiers, and then they go in with a health service. So they're actually a private company who are blackmailing politicians.
Right.
In a way that gets them into key places in governments, and we see it. I mean, it happens. This isn't beyond it is possibilities. It's happening.
Well, this is not fantasy.
No, it's not.
It's just a slight extrapolation of existing reality.
Yeah.
Yes.
But my main characters, I was driving past the local bowling alley and I saw a motorbike with a piece of tarpaulin over it, and it was flapping in the wind. And I was driving past and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if there was a body under there? And that is the beginning of the story, because the body is a key element of the story, but you don't get to until, I don't know, say chapter 40. But that spun back and spun forwards, and that's a key character. So this is just about how writing works, isn't it?
I'm Mark Henderson. I want to talk about Linda Nicklin's novel Stormgirl, which I read in 2020, shortly after it was published. This novel extrapolates from the current perilous state of the Earth to a horrific future where all those little scraps of resources that remain are ruthlessly exploited by the super rich, and the remainder of the now much reduced human population is among those scraps. Now, don't think this to be a hysterical overreaction to the climate crisis by some zealot who is half informed. If you get hold of this book, which I really recommend, and read the appendix and follow the links, you will find evidence for the wealth of research, impeccable research, that Ms. Nicklin conducted to form the basis of the story. And the results of that research gave me cold shudders, and I think it probably will with everyone. Now, this novel has a brutal dystopian theme, but there are three characteristics that make it palatable despite that. First and foremost, I think, it is what in the old days we used to call a rattling good yarn. It's an adventure story, and the pace is, all right, the tension rises and falls as it always should in a novel, but the pace is always high. The plot never congeals, it never gets stuck anywhere. And second, the horrors of this imagined near future world are faced full on, but Miss Nicklin never dwells on to a maudlin extent or makes them distasteful. They're presented, but we don't have an author that wallows in them. And third, this novel has an absolutely wonderful protagonist whose character toughens and evolves as her story unfolds. And the book has a wealth of strong, brave, and admirable women characters whose courage and commitment give us a glimmer of hope for the world's future. There are bad guys whom, well, I won't put names to them, but they can be seen as satirical portraits of certain influential people who are alive today. I loved them. The protagonist's backstory is, well, it's fantastical, but only as a necessary plot device. So in the context of the novel, I had no difficulty swallowing it. The amazing thing about Storm Girl is that it's a debut novel. There aren't many debut novels of this quality. I started reading it in the afternoon after I got it. I had a break for dinner and I didn't stop reading until the small hours of the morning. Then, a few months later, I read it again and got the same kick out of it as I had before.
Storm Girl, a stunning commentary on turbulent times. Storm Girl by Linda Nicklin is much more than its label of eco-thriller. It has adventure, mystery, romance, and themes that echo chillingly off the modern world. Its protagonist, a young woman called Angel, is convincingly drawn, a character with whom it is very easy to empathise. Concentrating on the background to this book, I don't want to put anyone off. This is a very well-researched book, but it's also a very good read with a well-drawn cast of characters. It has excitement, suspense, drama, and it's quite scary in places. But I want to dive into this particular area because of the work that Linda Nicklin did as background to this book. And there's a whole section at the back of the book which describes this background work. It's not in the least reassuring to know that everything Linda Nicklin writes about has either happened, is actually happening now, or could very easily happen very soon. So, although this is one of those questions I wanted to ask, I wasn't at all sure that I actually wanted to hear the answer. And this is what I said to Linda. In terms of both climate change and the rise of an autocratic elite, you've done considerable research and used scenarios that are already partly realised, e.g. the floating cities. Rise in sea levels is an urgent problem, albeit that COVID grabbed the headlines soon after your book was published. Given the events of the past couple of years, how do you now feel about the scenarios of Storm Girl? Do you think they're more or less likely to come about in the way you describe? Well, I have to say I wasn't expecting a reassuring reply to that question, and indeed I didn't get one. This is what Linda said. I can't begin to tell you about the horrors facing us if the Earth warms to the 30 or even 40 degrees C that our current pathway predicts. The scenarios in Storm Girl are based on IPCC predictions. Many of the things that happen in the book are already happening now. We're witnessing resource wars, mass migration, heat domes, wildfires, floods, nation-states disappearing beneath rising seas, and parts of our world are already becoming uninhabitable. If you want to give yourself nightmares, check out the increasingly frequently occurring high humidity heat combinations. At a certain level, the body can't sweat to cool itself, and fit, healthy adults die within 6 hours. Children and babies much sooner. In the book, Rafe explains global breadbasket failure to Angel when the resistance first meets in New York. Ukraine is a key part of the global breadbasket, and this year there's a real risk of famine in some parts of the world that don't usually see it. There are things I didn't expect to see coming true. For example, how quickly public transport could be an infection hazard, or the speed that international supply chains could break down. COVID gave us a glimpse of that. The rise of inequality marches on. Our current economic model assumes endless resources and endless growth. It doesn't factor in the destruction of the planet or the human degradation as a negative cost. And as long as the only measure of success is GDP, the super rich, the banks and the major fossil fuel companies will carry on their destructive path. This transition is complete in Storm Girl, and I don't see it slowing in the real world. Floating cities do exist, but I think they're also a metaphor for the yawning gap between the rich and poor. The suffering of the masses is invisible to people so rich that they can reinvent their lives and themselves at a whim. I don't think that we learned the lessons that COVID presented to us. Everything is connected. Nature is fragile and at the same time immensely powerful. Society can change at speed, and terrible things can happen if you don't listen to the science and then act. I wish we had. As I said, it's not a reassuring answer, but it's surely one that people need not only to hear, but also to really start to act on.
Joining us on the line now from the UK is committed environmentalist Linda Nicklin, talking about her debut novel. It's set in the near future, where climate change has led to the breakdown of society as a small elite plunders what is left of the Earth's resources. It's a dramatic read based on solid research into both climate change and the rise of a self-interested elite. It's called Storm Girl. Welcome to the book show, Linda.
Hi, thank you. Well, great to be here.
That's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. And it sounds like there's a lot of passion that's gone into this book.
Yes, I could have made it twice as long. It's been very difficult to narrow down the passion to focus it, and it develops every day. Today I saw something, I thought I could have put that in. So who knows, there might be a follow-up.
So had you been thinking about it and working on it for quite a while?
Yeah, I would say 6 or 7 years. The character Angel has been in my mind for a long time, and I decided, after taking redundancy from my work as an occupational therapist, to actually find my voice. So I joined a choir and did a master's in creative writing. So, and at that point, she really grew into a person who I could write a story around. But the issues are something I've felt passionate about really since the 1970s.
Yeah. And did the creative writing course help very much then to focus your ideas?
Not as such. I met some excellent people. I learned to write to deadlines and to take criticism and work to a structure. It was a good course for that, and also to give me confidence, because I actually signed up for it believing I couldn't do it. So I found lots of personal elements, but in the end you have to sit down and write the book, don't you? And that's not something that masters can help me do. It just gives me the ability to discern what works and what doesn't.
Because you've also written short stories and scripts as well. What's the difference for you with the three mediums?
When I finished the Masters, one of the things I decided to do was effectively write my own curriculum for learning, because I wanted to carry on learning. And the short stories started off as a way of trying to broaden my CV, and there's lots and lots of short story competitions. And it's good to write to a prompt and with a deadline, in my perspective. So I've enjoyed those very much. And in fact, my next book is developing from the beginning. The beginning of it is a short story that I wrote, and that's become the end of the story, and now I'm getting my character to that point. So it's brilliant. It makes you sort of think on the hoof, really. As far as plays go, scripts, I really enjoy writing them, because when you write, you're meant to show, not tell, and the scripts are the ultimate distillation of that. You can't tell people what's going on. You've got to tell it through the actors. So it's really interesting, and when you other people read it, or you see parts of it being performed, you realise how much extra people see in it. So I really enjoy all three mediums of writing.
And your scripts tend to be more comedies?
Yes, from sort of a different perspective on life. Comedies about usually women are the main characters. I've got one that's almost finished, about a woman who gets into financial difficulty, and so she decides to work in a residential care home, do night shifts, and rent a house out on Airbnb to try and get out of debt. And you might imagine it doesn't run smoothly, but she turns into a very unlikely detective.
Brilliant.
So, so quite different to Storm Girl.
Yes.
Quite different.
So how would you describe Storm Girl?
It's the story of a girl who, in a way, has been like Rapunzel. She's been kept in a tower. She's been protected for her own good, not for reasons of possession. And it's about her discovery of who she is as she's thrown from a fairly sheltered place into the worst of the ultimate destination of neoliberalism and oligarchy that we're seeing grow across the planet now, and the resulting climate catastrophes that we're seeing beginning to grow. So she has to learn about the reality of life and who she is and who she can trust. So it's a complex story, but I think that she's a very strong character and she sort of pulls it through, and the people around her are I really enjoyed writing about some of the people around her in the resistance, particularly the star people. You don't get many strong, older female characters in thrillers. So they were fun to write, and they're resilient, strong, experienced women, but ultimately are invisible because of their age. So they were quite, as I say, resourceful and helpful to her.
And what age have you aimed the book at, would you say?
It's an adult book. I did think for a while it was going to be an young adult crossover, but I think that in the process of writing, Angel matured. I've got friends and so of all ages reading it and finding different things in it, which is always fascinating. I've never really appreciated how interesting it is to see what people bring to your writing. So I think it is relevant to younger people right through to older age people.
And tell me about your thoughts on climate change then, and what inspired this story.
Well, I feel passionately about stopping the climate ecological emergency. It is possible to do. We simply need the political will. And in a way, the state that we're in is a failure of democracy. It's been hijacked by vested interests and political lobby groups funded by the super rich. Not all super rich, there are certainly super rich people who actually want to stop the climate and ecological emergency, but there are a powerful group of people and media moguls who actually are accelerating things, lobbying against green energy, for instance, or things like that. If we are to survive, and I have friends and so on who say, well, it won't happen in my lifetime. Well, I don't take that really as a good reason for doing nothing.
No.
But actually, it is happening in our lifetime as we speak. It just is not happening on our doorstep yet. If you look at the southern hemisphere, there are catastrophic things happening in the global south. And it makes me very sad to think that the people who've done least to cause the climate emergency are paying and will pay the highest price.
Yeah,
There's just so much injustice. I feel very powerfully and passionately about injustice, and that we should not be hypnotized or sleepwalk into a catastrophic disaster that can be changed if we act now.
And do you believe that there's lots that we can be doing as individuals to help the process?
I think as individuals we can all do our parts, but we have to actually change our model of economics, for instance. Our current model of economics is unsustainable because it has a fantasy at the beginning, which is that there are infinite resources, and a fantasy at the end, which is that when you finish with those resources, that they cease to exist. Well, they don't. They're just changed into carbon dioxide or pollution or plastic that we have in our bodies now. So that kind of model of economics was actually created by an engineer who used a pump system as his model. That's how you get the model. There's a much newer model of economics called a donut economics, which takes the World Health Organization's values for humanity, that everybody should have access to clean water, to clean air, to food, to a democratic process, to education and so on. If you imagine that center of the donut, and the outer ring of the donut is actually the world's finite limits. And this model of economics takes into account the impact on humanity and the impact on the planet and how we manage our economics. It's called donut economics. It's quite revolutionary. Amsterdam is trialing it, and there are a number of cities and states around the world that are actually putting that into practice now.
Interesting.
It means that everything is contained within the capacity of the planet to sustain us, and that everybody gets a fair and equal life, which I think is a very honourable and decent thing, and I don't understand why anybody would not want to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Well, if people want to get a copy of your novel, it's called Storm Girl, and it's available on our website, tre.radio. It's by Linda Nicklin, who we've been chatting to. Linda, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Yes, it's been a pleasure.
It's been great working with fantastic books. You feel as if you're working with people, real people. They've been kind and supportive, and I've learned a massive amount during the editing process. That's been wonderful. It's good to work with local publishers, and they publish a really wide range of books, really interesting books, including cookery books, which I can't get enough of. They also, interestingly, publish games, and I like games. So it's been a really good match, and it's been great working with them.